the future of life, but the past of life, or at least the past of modern humans, if you like. And just as an introduction, let me point out to you that if you study genetic variation in humans from all over the world today, what you find is that most genetic variation can be found in Africa. And if you look at all variation that is outside Africa, that's less than what you find inside Africa. And that's surprising, because there are, of course, many, many more people living outside Africa than inside Africa. And the interpretation of that is that modern humans, the ancestors of everybody alive today on the planet, evolved in Africa, lived there for a while, accumulated genetic variation, and then a part of that variation went out and colonized the rest of the world. And with genetic tricks, we can also figure out approximately when that was happened, and that was very recently. Modern humans, well, maybe 200,000–300,000 years ago in Africa, and less than 100,000 years ago, more like 60–70,000 years ago, they started seriously colonizing the rest of the world. But they were not alone at that time. There were other forms of humans around in Africa, and outside Africa, in Eurasia, in Western Eurasia, those modern humans that came out of Africa met Neanderthals, and in Eastern Eurasia, Denisovans, distant relatives of Neanderthals that lived in this part of the world. So those Neanderthals and Denisovans are the closest evolutionary relatives to everyone alive today. So that's sort of the basis of our big interest in it. We are interested in how we differ from them, what makes us special, and in the question why we are here today and they seem to have disappeared. So if we want to ask those questions by genetic means, what we need to do is retrieve DNA, genetic material, from old bones that are at least 40–50,000 years old that look like this. And the technology for that is then what we have worked on over the past couple of decades. You sequence lots of short fragments from such bones, match them to the human genome, and start reconstructing how the genomes of those other forms of humans looked like. And that then allows you to, when you compare it to further out groups such as great apes, you can see things that we share with the Neanderthals, that changes that happen on that common lineage. You can find things that are unique to the Neanderthals and Denisovans, and those things that are unique to modern humans. So that's one cool thing with having these genomes of our closest relatives. Another insight that came from that was that if we look, for example, on one chromosome here, chromosome 9, in different individuals, each line is an individual, we find big segments of tens of thousands of nucleotides that are identical or very, very similar to the Neanderthal genome. And that then indicates that when modern humans met these Neanderthals, they had babies together, and some of those babies were successful enough to contribute to the genes of people today. So variation came over from these Neanderthals and exists in people today. And you find this contribution everywhere outside Africa. It adds up to, in each individual, to 1 or 2%, but different people carry different parts of it. So around 60% or so of the Neanderthal genome is still present in people today. So if you like, they're not totally extinct, they live on in many of us today. But so we can then perhaps come back to the question, why are we here and not Neanderthals or Denisovans? And there are 4 sort of speculations about that I wanted to bring to you, maybe as a basis for a discussion afterwards.
Toekomst van leven, wij zijn dat. Wij zijn de future humans. Wij zijn die verandering zelf. Dat moet uit ons komen. En het komt ook al uit ons.
Suggesting that modern human population sizes were much larger than those of other forms of humans. You can see that here. You see present-day Africans and more genetic variation than people outside Africa, as we said. But Neanderthals and Denisovans had even less, suggesting that their population size was smaller. There's also archaeological evidence suggesting that if you look at how many archaeological sites there are from late Neanderthals or early modern humans, there are more such sites from modern humans, and they seem to have been used more intensely. And modern humans, of course, spread to many parts of the world where these other forms of people never came. They spread to Japan, they spread to the Americas, to Australia, and so on. So one part of why we are here and not they may simply be that we were more numerous and absorbed these other forms of humans into our population, so their sort of morphology disappeared, if you like. But there are other things one can note also. For example, that cultural and technological evolution seems to accelerate with modern humans. At least from 70,000 years ago or so, technology becomes regionalized and changed rapidly,